When Commander Vex'thara of the Nexari Dominion detected the cryopod's activation signal, she ordered the immediate evacuation of 14 battle fleets without even knowing who was inside. Within 6 hours, every major alien power in the galaxy had received the same transmission and made the same decision: retreat to minimum safe distance and await further orders. The human inside that pod hadn't even opened her eyes yet, but her awakening had already triggered the largest coordinated military withdrawal in galactic history. The salvage operation on the derelict human transport ship New Horizons had been routine until that moment. Captain Thek'mor of the Nexari salvage vessel Void Hunter had been picking through human wreckage for 3 standard cycles now, ever since the Terran Confederation had mysteriously vanished from known space 2 centuries ago. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The New Horizons was a massive colony ship, one of dozens the humans had launched during their expansion period. Like all human vessels found since the disappearance, it had been abandoned, life support systems shut down, crew quarters empty. No distress signals. The prevailing theory among Zen archaeologists was that humans had encountered some threat that forced them to evacuate their ships and retreat to unknown space. Captain Thek'mor's crew had been systematically cataloging the ship's contents when they found the hidden bay. Deep in the ship's core, behind blast doors that required their heavy cutting equipment to breach, they discovered a single cryopreservation unit. Unlike the ship's main cryo bay, which was empty like all the others they'd found, this pod was active, its biomonitors showing stable life signs. "Captain," called out his science officer, Vex'thara, her crystalline voice ringing with excitement. "The readings are unusual. The occupant appears to be human, but the pod's power source is something I've never seen before. It's drawing energy from quantum fluctuations in subspace itself." Thek'mor studied the readings on his scanner. The technology was clearly human in origin, but far more advanced than anything in their databases. Most disturbing was the pod's isolation protocols. It was sealed not just against the vacuum of space, but against dimensional intrusion, psychic scanning, and even quantum observation. Whatever was inside, the humans had taken extraordinary measures to hide it. "Get it aboard," Thek'mor ordered, "and send a priority transmission to High Command. Tell them we found something that might explain what happened to the humans." The cryopod was carefully transported to the Void Hunter's medical bay. As they moved it, Vex'thara noticed something that made her secondary hearts skip a beat. The pod's external markings weren't in standard human script, they were in ancient Nexari, a language that had been dead for millennia. The symbols roughly translated to "Final Protocol, Do Not Wake, Authorized Personnel Only." How could humans have known a dead Nexari language? And why would they use it to label their most secure cryopod? As they installed the pod in their medical bay, automated systems throughout the galaxy began registering the quantum signature of its activation sequence. Deep space monitoring stations flagged the energy pattern. Military databases triggered ancient alert protocols that most officers didn't even know existed. On the bridge of the Nexari Dominion flagship Eternal Conquest, Fleet Commander Vex'thara was reviewing routine patrol reports when her communications officer's voice cut through the bridge, chatter like a plasma blade. "Commander, we're receiving a priority alpha transmission from the Xenoarchaeological Division. They're reporting activation of a Terminus-class cryopod." The bridge fell silent. Vex'thara felt her blood chill. She had only heard whispers of Terminus-class protocols in the most classified military briefings. Ancient contingency plans from the early days of galactic expansion, when first contact procedures were still being developed. "Confirm that transmission," she ordered, her voice steady despite the fear growing in her chest. "Confirmed, Commander. Quantum signature match is positive." The pod is aboard the salvage vessel Void Hunter in the Kepler 442 system. Vex'thara didn't hesitate. All fleets, emergency withdrawal to perimeter stations. Execute Protocol 77 Alpha immediately. No vessels are to approach the Kepler 442 system until further notice. Across the bridge, her officers stared in disbelief. Protocol 77 Alpha hadn't been used in over 400 years. It meant retreating from an entire star system and establishing a quarantine perimeter. Commander, her tactical officer ventured. The Void Hunter has a crew of only 12. Surely we could— No. Vex'thara's voice was final. You don't understand what's happening here. We're not retreating from the salvage crew. We're retreating from whatever's in that pod. As the Nexari fleets began their withdrawal, similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. The Corvani Empire, the Stellar Hegemony, the Free Trader Coalition, every major power had monitoring systems that recognized the quantum signature. And every one of them was making the same decision: run first, ask questions later. On the Void Hunter, Captain Thek'mor was completely unaware that his routine salvage operation had just triggered the largest military evacuation in galactic history. He was focused on the bio readings from the cryopod, watching as automated systems began the awakening sequence. Inside the pod, after 2 centuries of dreamless sleep, Dr. Elena Vasquez was beginning to wake up. She had no idea that her mere existence was causing panic across 14 star systems, or that every alien military commander in the galaxy was desperately hoping she would just go back to sleep. The awakening process would take another 6 hours. But already, the quantum resonance of her brain activity was being detected by sensors she didn't know existed, triggering protocols she had never heard of. The galaxy's most powerful military forces were in full retreat from a single sleeping human, and none of them were willing to explain why. 6 hours into the awakening sequence, Captain Thek'mor received the first transmission that would shatter everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. Void Hunter, this is Fleet Command. You are ordered to cease all operations and maintain minimum safe distance from the cryopod. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to accelerate the awakening process. Thek'mor stared at the communication display in confusion. Fleet Command, this is Void Hunter. We're conducting a routine xenoarchaeological operation. The cryopod contains a single human female, approximately 30 years old. No apparent weapons, or negative. The response came so fast it overlapped his transmission. Captain, you are dealing with a Terminus-class entity. Quarantine protocols are now in effect. Maintain your position, but do not interact with the subject upon awakening. Terminus-class entity? Thek'mor had never heard the term before, but the fear in Fleet Command's voice was unmistakable. He turned to his science officer. Zeftai, what's a Terminus-class entity? Zeftai's normally steady hands were trembling as she accessed the military databases. Captain, I'm finding references, but they're heavily classified. What I can access suggests these are classifications from the pre-contact wars. The pre-contact wars ended 400 years ago, Thek'mor said. Slowly. Before we even knew humans existed. Exactly. Zeftai's voice was barely a whisper. Captain, these protocols predate human contact by centuries. How could we have classifications for human entities before we ever met humans? Before Thek'mor could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The cryopod's biomonitors were spiking, showing neural activity patterns that shouldn't have been possible for any known species. The quantum field around the pod was fluctuating in ways that made their instruments scream warnings about dimensional instability. She's dreaming, Zeftai reported, her voice filled with scientific fascination and growing terror. But Captain, her brain waves are operating on 17 different dimensional frequencies simultaneously. That's not biologically possible. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Fleet Commander Vex'thara was reviewing classified files that she'd hoped never to see again. Ancient documents from the early days of galactic expansion, when the various alien civilizations had first begun exploring beyond their home systems. Documents that spoke of entities that existed between dimensions, beings that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. The Nexari had encountered them first, during the expansion into what was now called the Forbidden Sectors. Entire fleets had vanished. Planets had been found empty, their populations simply gone without a trace. The few survivors who made it back spoke of beings that looked like the various galactic species, but were fundamentally different, enhanced, evolved, capable of things that violated the basic laws of physics. The war had lasted 50 years. In the end, the various alien civilizations had united for the first time in galactic history, not to conquer each other, but to drive these entities into the unknown regions of space. The victory had come at an enormous cost. Entire sectors had been abandoned, marked as forbidden zones that even now, 4 centuries later, no one dared to enter. "Commander," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Every major power is detecting the same quantum signature. The Corvani Empire has mobilized their entire Third Fleet. The hegemony is evacuating civilian populations from border worlds." Vex'thara closed the classified file and looked out at the stars. "Because they remember," she said quietly. "Even if they don't want to admit it, they remember what humans really are." Aboard the Void Hunter, Dr. Elena Vasquez was experiencing the strangest awakening of her life. Her consciousness was returning slowly, filtered through layers of enhanced perception that hadn't existed when she'd entered cryosleep. She could sense the ship around her, feel the quantum fluctuations in the hull metal, perceive the emotional states of the aliens observing her from the other room. Most disturbing of all, she could sense their fear. It was radiating from them, in waves, a terror so profound that it made her wonder what had happened during her sleep. The last thing she remembered was the evacuation protocols being activated, the desperate rush to get the Terminus agents into deep sleep before. What? The memories were fragmented, but slowly reassembling themselves. The contact wars, the realization that humanity wasn't alone in the galaxy, the discovery that their new neighbors viewed them as an existential threat, and the ultimate decision. That had changed everything. "Status report," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible, but somehow carrying perfectly to the aliens in the next room. Captain Thek'mor felt his blood freeze. The human was awake, and she was speaking Nexari. Not just speaking it, she was using formal military protocols that had been classified for centuries. "How?" Vex'thara stammered. "How does she know our language? Our military codes?" Elena's voice came again, still barely a whisper, but somehow filling the entire ship. "I asked for a status report. How long was I in cryosleep? What is the current galactic political situation? And why are you all so afraid?" The questions were reasonable, logical, but they were being asked by someone who shouldn't have been able to know their language, shouldn't have been able to speak without a translation device, and definitely shouldn't have been able to project her voice through solid bulkheads. "Captain." Vex'thara's scanner readings were going haywire. "She's not just human. The genetic markers are human, but there are modifications, enhancements. Her neural pathways are interfacing directly with quantum fields. And Captain, she's getting stronger." As if responding to their conversation, Elena's voice changed. It was still gentle, still polite, but now it carried undertones of something vast and patient and infinitely dangerous. "I can hear your thoughts," she said softly. "I don't mean to intrude, but your fear is quite loud. Perhaps you could help me understand what has happened since I entered the program." Thek'mor realized with growing horror that she wasn't just reading their minds. She was reading their entire ship's database, accessing their communications. understanding their technology at a fundamental level, all while still lying motionless in her cryopod. The program? Vex'thara whispered. What program? Elena's laugh was like distant thunder. The Terminus Protocol, of course, the enhancement program. We couldn't let our species remain weak when there were so many interesting civilizations out there to meet. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And suddenly, everything made terrible sense. The abandoned human ships, the mysterious disappearance, the ancient protocols that predated human contact. Humanity hadn't vanished. They had transformed. And now one of them was waking up. The cryopod opened with a soft hiss, and Dr. Ilana Vasquez sat up slowly, stretching muscles that had been dormant for 2 centuries. To Captain Thek'mor and his crew, watching through reinforced observation windows, she looked perfectly human, approximately 30 years old, auburn hair, wearing a simple gray jumpsuit. The only unusual detail was her eyes, which seemed to reflect light in ways that human eyes shouldn't. "Good morning," Elena said pleasantly, looking directly at the observation window. "I appreciate you not fleeing immediately. Most species do when they detect a terminus awakening." Captain Thek'mor activated the communication system with trembling fingers. "Doctor, what should we call you?" "Elena is fine." Dr. Elena Vasquez, formerly of the Terran Confederation's Enhanced Contact Division. She stood up gracefully, and as her feet touched the deck plating, every electronic system on the ship briefly flickered. "I apologize for the interference. It takes time to adjust the quantum resonance after extended sleep." Vex'thara was frantically scanning Elena through the observation window, but her instruments were returning impossible readings. "Captain, her cellular structure is. It's like she exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And her brain activity is interfacing directly with our ship's systems." As if to prove the point, Elena glanced at a wall panel, and it immediately displayed detailed schematics of the Void Hunter's internal structure. "Nexari design, Mark 7 configuration," she noted approvingly. "Your engineers have made significant improvements since the last time we encountered your technology. The quantum shielding is particularly elegant." "The last time?" Thek'mor's voice cracked. "When did humans encounter Nexari technology before?" Elena's expression grew thoughtful. "The contact wars, of course. Though I suppose you call them the pre-contact wars. We found it interesting that your species developed such impressive military technology before you'd even met us officially." She walked to the observation window, placing her hand against the reinforced glass. Where her palm touched, the molecular structure of the material began to shift, becoming perfectly transparent. "The truth is, Captain, we've been watching all of you for quite some time before you discovered our outer colonies. Humanity needed to understand what we were dealing with before making formal contact. Your species, the Corvani, the hegemony, you, all had such fascinating ways of approaching conflict." Dr. Vex'thara's scanners were screaming warnings as the observation window's molecular structure continued to change. "Captain, she's rewriting matter at the atomic level. This shouldn't be possible without massive energy expenditure, but I'm detecting no power source." Elena smiled. "The energy comes from quantum vacuum fluctuations. Dr. Vex'thara, the terminus enhancement allows us to access zero-point energy directly. Very efficient once you understand how consciousness interfaces with fundamental forces." The casual mention of zero-point energy manipulation sent chills through both aliens. That was theoretical technology that their best scientists claimed might be possible in another 1,000 years of development. "Dr. Vasquez," Captain Thek'mor said carefully, "what exactly is the Terminus Protocol?" "Evolutionary acceleration," Elena replied, examining the ship's bulkheads with interest. "When humanity first detected signals from galactic civilization, we realized we had a problem. You'd all been developing military technology for millennia while we were still confined to one star system. We needed to level the playing field. She gestured, and the room's gravity field shifted subtly, causing small objects to float in perfect geometric patterns around her. The Terminus Protocol was designed to enhance human consciousness to interact directly with quantum fields. Enhanced reflexes, expanded sensory perception, matter manipulation, dimensional awareness. The usual package for dealing with potentially hostile alien contact. But the contact wars, Vex'thara protested. They ended in a stalemate. Both sides withdrew to neutral territories. Elena's laugh was like crystal chimes. Oh, my dear scientist. There was no stalemate. We demonstrated just enough capability to make your alliances retreat. Then we implemented the real plan. The lights in the room began to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, and Captain Thek'mor realized that Elena wasn't consciously controlling the ship's systems. She was unconsciously interfacing with them just by being present. What real plan? He asked, though he was beginning to fear the answer. Strategic withdrawal and multiplication, Elena said, settling into a chair that molded itself to perfectly support her body. We evacuated our visible colonies to make you think we'd retreated. Meanwhile, we launched hundreds of colony ships into deep space, each carrying thousands of volunteers for the Terminus Protocol. We scattered ourselves across the galaxy and went into deep sleep. The implications hit both aliens like a plasma blast. The abandoned human ships they'd been finding for centuries weren't the remains of a failed evacuation, they were deployment. Platforms, scattered ourselves where? Captain Thek'mor's voice was barely a whisper. Elena's eyes glowed with an inner light that had nothing to do with reflected photons. Everywhere, Captain. Every sector, every trade route, every strategic system. We've been sleeping in the dark spaces between your worlds for 200 years, waiting for the right time to wake up. She stood up and walked to what had been solid wall. As she approached, the metal simply flowed aside, creating a doorway. The wonderful thing about enhanced consciousness, she continued, stepping through the impossible opening, is that it operates on quantum scales. We don't need to be awake to monitor galactic communications, track fleet movements, or influence probability matrices. We've been learning about you while we slept. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship as Elena's presence interfaced with more and more systems. Navigation computers started plotting courses to locations that weren't in any database. Communication arrays began transmitting on frequencies that could reach across galactic distances instantaneously. Dr. Vasquez, Captain Thek'mor said desperately. What are you doing? Checking in, Elena replied pleasantly. It's been 2 centuries since we've had a proper status update. I'm just letting everyone know that the next phase is beginning. As her words faded, similar awakening signals began, emanating from the dark spaces throughout the galaxy. In asteroid fields, abandoned sectors, and the cold depths between stars, other cryopods were receiving her quantum transmission and beginning their own awakening sequences. The galaxy's worst fear was becoming reality. Humanity wasn't returning as refugees or explorers. They were returning as gods. Within minutes of Elena's quantum transmission, emergency reports began flooding command centers across the galaxy. The first came from the Corvani Empire's mining operation in the Veil Nebula sensors. Had detected a massive energy signature awakening deep within an asteroid field they'd been harvesting for decades. The second report arrived from a hegemony research station. Their long-range scanners had identified 17 separate awakening signatures in what they believed to be empty space. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Fleet Commander Vex'thara watched in growing horror as the tactical display filled with red markers. Each marker represented a detected terminus awakening, and they were appearing faster than her crew could track them. Commander, her intelligence officer reported, voice shaking. We're registering awakening signatures in every sector. The pattern Suggests they've been positioned to monitor all major trade routes, military installations, and planetary systems. How many? Vex'thara asked, though she dreaded the answer. Current count is at 400 and rising. But Commander, these aren't random placements. They're positioned strategically, every critical hyperspace junction, every major supply line, every... The officer paused, his expression turning pale. Every way station used by our evacuation fleets is being monitored by at least 3 awakening signatures. The implications hit Vex'thara like a plasma torpedo. The humans hadn't just scattered randomly across the galaxy, they'd studied galactic civilization for centuries and positioned themselves to observe everything. More terrifying still, they'd known exactly where the alien fleets would retreat. 2. Aboard the Void Hunter, Elena was calmly reviewing data streams that appeared as glowing text in the air around her. Captain Thek'mor and Dr. Vex'thara watched in fascination and terror as she processed information at impossible speeds. Interesting, Elena murmured. The Nexari have expanded their territory by 37% since we went to sleep. The Corvani have developed quantum torpedo technology, impressive, though still rather primitive. And the hegemony has established trade agreements with, 14 new species. You've all been quite busy. How are you accessing our databases? Dr. Vex'thara asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. Elena smiled. I'm not accessing your databases, Doctor. I'm reading the quantum information patterns embedded in the space around your technology. Every interaction leaves traces in the quantum foam. Enhanced consciousness allows us to read those traces like a history book. She gestured, and holographic displays materialized in the air, showing detailed maps of current galactic political boundaries, fleet positions, and resource allocations. Information that should have been classified beyond any possible security clearance. Dr. Vex'thara, Captain, Thek'mor said carefully, why did your people position themselves to monitor our evacuation routes? Elena's expression grew more serious. Because we learned from the contact wars, Captain. Your species, all of them, respond to unknown threats the same way. You retreat to what you consider safe distances, establish defensive perimeters, and begin planning preemptive strikes. It's quite predictable, actually. She waved her hand, and the holographic display zoomed out to show the entire galaxy. Hundreds of red dots now marked awakening signatures, but they weren't randomly distributed. They formed a complex geometric pattern that encompassed every major civilization. We've been monitoring your military doctrines for 2 centuries, Elena continued. We know your fleet compositions, your strategic thinking, your logistical capabilities. Most importantly, we know your fear responses. Dr. Vex'thara stared at the display in growing horror. You've been studying us like laboratory specimens. Not specimens, Doctor, students. We wanted to understand how galactic civilization had developed, what drives your conflicts, how you might react to our eventual return. Elena's voice remained pleasant, but there was something infinitely patient and dangerous in her tone. The data has been quite illuminating. New reports were streaming in from across the galaxy. A hegemony patrol fleet had detected massive quantum distortions in the outer rim entire star systems that appeared to be folding through dimensional space. Corvani intelligence reported that several of their deep space monitoring stations had simply vanished, leaving behind only perfectly spherical voids in spacetime. Elena, Captain Thek'mor said quietly, how many of your people are out there? Elena's eyes grew distant as she accessed information streams from across the galaxy. The initial deployment included approximately 50,000 Terminus agents across 800 colony ships. Of course, not all missions were successful. Some ships were destroyed by cosmic events. Others experienced technical failures. But our current awakening count is... She paused, processing data. 37,412. Active Terminus agents now coming online. The number hit both aliens like a physical blow. 37,000 enhanced humans, each apparently capable of manipulating reality itself, strategically positioned throughout galactic civilization. But that's not the concerning number, Alina added conversationally. What do you mean? Dr. Vex'thara whispered. Alina smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't entirely pleasant. The Terminus protocol wasn't just about enhancement, Doctor. It was about multiplication. Each agent carries the genetic templates and quantum matrices needed to create more enhanced individuals. We've had 2 centuries to study your biological patterns through quantum observation. She gestured again, and the holographic display showed new data genetic analyses of every major species in galactic civilization, complete mapping of their biological weaknesses and capabilities. The beauty of enhanced consciousness, Alina explained, is that we can influence probability at the quantum level. Random mutations, beneficial adaptations, accelerated evolution, all quite manageable when you understand how consciousness interfaces with genetic expression. Captain Thek'mor felt his blood freeze. You're talking about converting other species to your enhancement protocols. Converting is such a crude term, Alina replied. We prefer elevating. After 2 centuries of observation, we've identified individuals in every major civilization who would benefit from consciousness enhancement. Scientists, philosophers, artists, beings who could appreciate the full scope of reality once their awareness is expanded. Reports continued flooding in from across the galaxy. The awakening signatures weren't just monitoring anymore. They were acting. Trade routes were being disrupted by localized gravitational anomalies. Communication networks were experiencing impossible interference patterns. Several military outposts reported that their crews were beginning to exhibit enhanced cognitive abilities despite having no contact with human technology. The elevation process, Alina continued, operates through quantum resonance. Enhanced consciousness naturally influences nearby biological systems, encouraging beneficial mutations and expanded awareness. It's quite elegant, really no force required, just proximity to the enhanced quantum fields. Dr. Vex'thara's scanner was detecting impossible readings from the ship's crew quarters. Her own cellular structure was beginning to show signs of quantum enhancement, despite all shielding protocols. Dr. Vasquez, she said urgently, you're changing us. Just by being here, you're altering our biology. Alina nodded approvingly. The first phase of elevation. Enhanced consciousness is inherently viral. It spreads naturally through quantum entanglement. Within a few hours of exposure, you'll begin to experience expanded sensory perception, increased cognitive processing, and basic matter-energy interface capabilities. She stood up, and reality bent around her like water. The question is, Captain Thek'mor, what will you do with your new awareness when it fully manifests? Across the galaxy, 37,000 awakening humans were asking the same question. Of civilizations that had thought themselves the masters of space. The age of purely alien galactic civilization was ending. The age of enhanced consciousness was beginning. 72 hours after Alina's awakening, the emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on the neutral station, Harmony Prime. Representatives from every major civilization had gathered for what many believed would be their final meeting. As independent species, Fleet Commander Vex'thara represented the Nexari Dominion, her crystalline features showing stress fractures that hadn't been there a week ago. The situation is no longer containable, announced Supreme Chancellor Korthek. Of the hegemony, his 6 arms gesturing at the holographic display showing the galaxy. Red zones now covered nearly 30% of inhabited space areas where reality itself had become unstable due to terminus activity. Our fleets cannot operate in quantum-disrupted space. Our colonies are reporting mass consciousness elevation events, and our attempts at military response have been ineffective. The understatement was profound. 3 different battle fleets had attempted to engage Terminus agents directly. Each fleet had simply vanished, not destroyed, but translated into higher dimensional space where conventional matter could not follow. The crews were returned unharmed 3 days later, but they were no longer entirely alien. Enhanced consciousness had taken root in their minds, giving them perspectives that transcended their original species limitations. We must consider negotiation, Admiral Zephyros of the Free Colonies said quietly. Whatever the humans want, perhaps we can reach an accommodation. What they want, came a familiar voice from the chamber's center, is quite simple. Elena Vasquez materialized in the middle of the council chamber, her form solidifying from quantum probability into physical presence. She hadn't traveled there, she had simply chosen to exist in that location instead of aboard the Void Hunter. Around the chamber, alien dignitaries recoiled, but their enhanced security systems registered no threat. How could weapons designed for physical reality threaten someone who existed partially outside it? Dr. Vasquez, Chancellor Korthek said with admirable composure, "You have the Council's attention." Alina smiled pleasantly, and reality around her seemed more vivid, more real than the rest of the chamber. "Thank you, Chancellor. I've come to explain what's happening and offer you a choice that your military commanders seem reluctant to present." She gestured, and the holographic display changed to show the current state of galactic civilization, but now the data included perspectives that no alien technology could have gathered. Quantum consciousness networks, probability matrices, dimensional stability readings across thousands of star systems. "First, let me address your concerns about conquest," Elena said. "We're not interested in ruling your civilizations. Government, administration, resource management, these are concerns of purely physical existence. Enhanced consciousness operates on different priorities." Fleet Commander Vex'thara leaned forward. "Then what do you want?" "Evolution," Elena replied. "Simply, for 2 centuries, we've observed galactic civilization developing along predictable patterns. Territorial expansion, resource competition, military buildup, the same cycles that nearly destroyed humanity during our resource wars. You're approaching the same crisis point we faced, technological capability advancing faster than wisdom." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Elena continued, her voice carrying the weight of vast patience. "The Terminus Protocol wasn't created just to enhance humans. It was designed to guide consciousness evolution across all suitable species. What you call contamination or conversion, we see as offering you the same choice we faced: transcend your limitations or remain trapped in cycles of conflict." Admiral Zephyros spoke up. "And if we choose to remain as we are?" Elena's expression grew thoughtful. "That's certainly your right. Enhanced consciousness doesn't impose itself by force. It simply expands the range of possibilities available to a species. However, physical-only civilizations tend to eventually destroy themselves through resource depletion, warfare, or technological accidents. We've observed this pattern across 17 different galactic regions." She waved her hand, and the display showed other galaxies, other civilizations that had faced similar transition points. Some showed vibrant networks of enhanced consciousness spanning multiple star systems. Others showed dark zones where advanced civilizations had simply burned themselves out. "The choice," Elena said, "is quite straightforward. You can continue developing as purely physical civilizations, managing the risks as best you can. Or you can accept consciousness enhancement and join a galactic community that operates beyond the limitations of matter, energy, and space-time." Chancellor Korthek's voice was strained. "What would that mean for our species' independence? Our cultures? Our identities?" "Enhanced consciousness doesn't erase identity," Elena explained. "It expands it. You would still be Nexari, Corvani, hegemony citizens, but you would also be capable of understanding perspectives beyond your original biological programming. You would retain your cultures while gaining access to the broader symphony of galactic consciousness. She gestured again, and suddenly every being in the chamber could perceive, for just a moment, what enhanced consciousness felt like. The boundaries between self and universe became fluid. The artificial separation between species dissolved into recognition of fundamental unity. The fears that drove interstellar conflict seemed as quaint as childhood worries. The experience lasted only seconds. But it changed everything. That, Elena said softly, is what we're offering. Not conquest, not domination, evolution. Fleet Commander Vex'thara was the first to speak after the demonstration. How long do we have to decide? Time, Elena smiled, is a rather fluid concept. At enhanced consciousness levels, from your perspective, you have as long as you need. From ours, the decision has already been made. We're simply waiting for you to discover what choice your deeper wisdom has already selected. She began to fade from view, her form becoming translucent as she prepared to return to higher dimensional space. Dr. Vasquez, Admiral Zephyros called out, "Will you be monitoring our deliberations?" Elena's laugh was like distant music. "Admiral, we've been monitoring your civilizations for 2 centuries. But enhanced consciousness doesn't need to spy on developing species. We can simply observe the probability matrices and see what choices you're likely to make." Her form became completely transparent, but her voice remained clear. "Take your time. Consider your options. Consult your wisest advisors. In the end, consciousness evolution is inevitable. It's simply a question of whether you choose to guide it or let it happen naturally." As Elena vanished completely, the council chamber remained silent for long minutes. Finally, Chancellor Korthek spoke. "I believe," he said slowly, "we need to reconsider our entire approach to this situation." Outside the station, alien fleets remained at their distant positions, but they were no longer retreating. For the first time in centuries, they were preparing to move forward not toward war, but toward a choice that would define the future of consciousness itself. The age of purely physical civilization was ending. The age of enhanced awareness was beginning. And across the galaxy, 37,000 patient teachers waited to guide their former enemies through the greatest transformation in galactic history. 1 year after, Elena Vasquez opened her eyes aboard the Void Hunter. Captain Thek'mor stood on the observation deck of what had once been the Nexari flagship Eternal Conquest. The ship itself had undergone remarkable changes. Its hull now shimmered with quantum crystalline structures that existed partially in higher dimensions, and its interior spaces had expanded beyond the constraints of 3-dimensional geometry. But the most remarkable change was in Captain Thek'mor himself. "It's difficult to remember what it felt like before," he said to Dr. Vex'thara, who materialized beside him in a cascade of probability waves. Like many scientists, she had been among the first to voluntarily undergo consciousness enhancement, her insatiable curiosity making the transition almost effortless. "The fear," Vex'thara replied, her enhanced awareness now capable of perceiving. "The quantum phone that connected all matter. The constant anxiety about resources, territory, survival. It seemed so limited now." They were observing the construction of New Harmony, a space station that existed simultaneously in 17 different dimensions. Beings from across the galaxy worked together on the project, not because they were forced to, but because enhanced consciousness made cooperation as natural as breathing. Nexari engineers worked alongside Corvani artists and hegemony philosophers, their enhanced minds sharing ideas at the speed of thought. "Status report from Earth," announced Commander Vex'thara, her consciousness expanding into the observation space rather than walking there physically. The former fleet commander had become something like a coordinator for the consciousness enhancement process, helping newly awakened beings adjust to their expanded awareness. "Earth?" Captain Thek'mor asked. The human homeworld had remained hidden from alien observation for centuries. Elena thought it was time for a proper reunion, Vex'thara explained. The original human population that remained on Earth has been developing enhanced consciousness naturally over the past 2 centuries. They're eager to meet their galactic family. Through the observation port, they could see ships arriving from all corners of the galaxy, not the warships of old, but vessels designed for exploration, art, and consciousness research. Each ship carried beings who had chosen enhancement. Their crews now capable of collaborative thinking that transcended individual limitations. I've been analyzing the transformation statistics, Dr. Vex'thara said. Data streams flowing around her like visible music. Approximately 67% of galactic civilization has chosen consciousness enhancement. The remaining 33% have established what they call preservation zones, areas where traditional consciousness is maintained and protected. Captain Thek'mor nodded approvingly. The choice had been genuine. No force, no coercion, simply the opportunity to evolve with full respect for those who chose to remain as they were. The enhanced beings had even helped establish advanced defense systems around the preservation zones, ensuring that traditional civilizations could develop at their own pace without external pressure. And the conflicts, he asked? Functionally eliminated in enhanced zones, Vex'thara reported. When you can directly perceive the consciousness of other beings, when you understand their perspectives as clearly as your own, warfare becomes impossible. The preservation zones still experience some traditional conflicts, but they're managing them with the wisdom gained from observing enhanced cooperation. Elena Vasquez appeared in their midst, her presence no longer startling but warmly welcome. She had become something like an elder teacher, helping coordinate the consciousness evolution process across hundreds of worlds. I wanted to share something with you, Elena said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in multiple dimensions. We've received communication from the Andromedas. The 3 enhanced beings felt a collective surge of excitement. The Andromedas were a consciousness network from another galaxy entirely. Beings who had achieved enhancement millions of years ago and had been waiting for local consciousness to evolve enough for meaningful contact. They're inviting us to join the Transgalactic Consciousness Collective, Elena continued. Apparently, our approach to voluntary enhancement respecting choice while offering opportunity has impressed them. Most civilizations either resist enhancement until they destroy themselves, or embrace it so completely that they lose their original diversity. She gestured, and a holographic display showed the local galactic cluster, with streams of enhanced consciousness connecting hundreds of star systems. But now those streams extended beyond their galaxy, reaching toward distant lights that represented other evolved civilizations. What does this mean for us? Captain Thek'mor asked. It means, Elena smiled, that what happened here, the awakening, the choice, the integration of enhancement with preservation, was more significant than we realized. We've demonstrated that consciousness evolution can happen without losing the richness of diverse perspectives. The Andromedas want to learn from our approach. Dr. Vex'thara's enhanced awareness was already reaching toward the distant galaxy, sensing the vast networks of consciousness that spanned millions of worlds. The scientific possibilities are incredible. Millions of years of consciousness research, cosmic-scale engineering projects, collaborative art that spans entire galactic superclusters. And the preservation zones? Vex'thara asked, her concern. For all beings enhanced and traditional, reflecting the expanded empathy that came with consciousness evolution. They'll be protected and honored, Elena assured her. The Transgalactic Collective has learned that diversity of consciousness, including the choice to remain unenhanced, is essential for continued growth. Traditional consciousness provides perspectives that enhanced beings can lose over time. We need each other. As they spoke, reports continued flowing in from across the galaxy. Former military installations had been converted into consciousness research centers. Trade routes had become highways for sharing artistic and philosophical insights. Planets that had once bristled with weapons now hosted collaborative projects to explore the deeper mysteries of existence. Sometimes I wonder, Captain Thek'mor mused, what would have happened if we had tried to fight instead of retreat when Elena first awakened? Elena's laugh carried the warmth of infinite patience. You would have learned the same lesson, just more slowly. Enhanced consciousness doesn't need to conquer. It simply needs to demonstrate what's possible. Fear would have given way to curiosity, curiosity to understanding, understanding to choice. She looked out at the construction of New Harmony, where beings from dozens of species worked together in perfect coordination. The retreat your fleets made wasn't cowardice, Captain. It was wisdom. You gave yourselves time to understand what was really being offered. As the cosmic day cycle ended on the station, beings across the galaxy were experiencing something unprecedented in their histories. Perfect peace not imposed by force, but chosen through understanding. The enhanced consciousness network pulsed with shared joy, collaborative creativity, and infinite potential for growth. The age of fear-based civilization had ended not in conquest, but in the simple recognition that consciousness itself was the greatest frontier of all. And as distant signals from the Andromedas promised even greater adventures ahead, the galaxy settled into its new role, a garden of consciousness in an infinite universe of awakening minds. Elena Vasquez had awakened from cryo-sleep to find alien fleets in retreat. 1 year later, those same fleets had become the foundation of something unprecedented. A galactic civilization based not on power, but on the infinite potential of awareness itself. The retreat had ended. The real journey was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.